Okay, hey, look, today we're talking about lead-ins. At some point during the course of this unit, we're talking about transitions. Like, for example, if you use the transition, for example, at the beginning of a sentence, it comes along with a comma. For example, comma, and we've been circling transitions. We also studied so far attributive tags. So, like if you said ATTICUS, Atticus says, that also comes along with a comma if you're using it before a piece of text evidence. Atticus says, and it's really the says part, we're just attributing what Atticus says to Atticus. And again, there's this comma here as well that accompanies attributive tags. And these are the super six that we've been studying. There's the transition, there's the lead-in, which we're going to get to today. The attributive tag is blue, text evidence is yellow. Here's the citation with the author and page number with period on the outside, and the lead out, how or why this yellow stuff that you borrowed supports whatever it is that you're trying to prove. Today, though, we're going to be doing without the lead out. We're not actually arguing anything. We're spending some time transitioning into a piece of text evidence, leading into a piece of text evidence, tagging whose words were borrowed, and presenting a piece of text evidence and noting the citation, what page number it came from. So we'll be working with that. For us, the lead-in is green. So this color coding is important so that down the road, when we're talking about lead-ins, we're all on the same page. When we're talking about attributive tags, we're all on the same page. When we're talking about transitions, they're circled and we're all on the same page. The lead-in is so that you can give the readers a little bit of context or background information. So you're not just taking this yellow stuff and just kind of chucking it at them because they don't know what to do with it. If you just throw the text evidence at them without giving them any context or background information, they may feel a little bit lost, even if they're familiar with the text you've been working with. So some familiar and obvious questions you might end up asking yourself and letting the reader know is, like what's been going on in the context of that text evidence you're about to present, like what's been happening. That's a lot easier when we're dealing with fiction, when we're dealing with a story. What's about to happen, like in the near future, what's about to happen? Who's involved? What's the conversation about? When are readers? Where are they? All of these questions are important to answer in order to give the reader a little bit of context before you present text evidence to them. And then there are lots of great lead-in starter words. These words alone are not lead-ins, but they're great for getting started with a lead-in. And I think, especially when it comes to writing about fiction, that the word when is probably at the top of the list for great lead-in starter words. I'm just going to put a star next to that one, just as a reminder to you that it works great. It works great to start a lead-in. In this first activity, which is labeled number 1, it looks very much like what you'll end up doing on your own for number 2 and beyond, depending on what's been assigned to you in your class. But in number 1, it looks like the activity is being entitled Transition, Lead-in, Attributive tag, and citation, with the citation being simply a parenthetical citation, meaning it's inside parentheses, author's last name, and whatever page number it came on. We're going to be dealing with page 116 today. So that's an example citation with the period on the outside of the parentheses. The directions say that, the following passage, the passage that you're about to get, is a piece of text evidence. We're going to pretend it's the piece of text evidence that we thought was a great chunk of text that would work for this pretend argument. We're not actually arguing anything, but it's a pretend argument. In each of these, you get about where the quote is, because you do have to dig around in the book. You got to dig around and find it, because you need it for the citation. You need to dig around for the lead in because you got to be able to answer these questions here in order to write a proper lead in. And that means you're going to have to find it and read around it in order to let readers know, like, what's been happening in the context of this yellow stuff. So you need to locate it in the novel, check its accuracy below, and punctuate it with the appropriate quotation marks, periods, commas as needed. So you just got to make sure that the yellow stuff, the text evidence that you're presenting, is properly presented. And then once you realize what the text evidence is and what it is you're going to be presenting, you need to transition into it. You need to lead into it. You need to tag whose words that yellow stuff is. And you need a citation. And again, here's the citation right up here. Without having to write it twice, here it is. It looks like it's already been written for you in this case. So speaking of page 116, it looks like this is the yellow stuff that you're being asked to transition into, lead into, and tag whose words they are. It looks like this. It says, what bothers me is that she and Jem will have to absorb some pretty ugly things, or some ugly things pretty soon. I'm not worried about Jem keeping his head, but Scout would just as soon jump on someone as look at him if her pride's at stake. Sounds about right for that girl. There's the citation at the end there, but it's this chunk right here. Apparently it's on page 116. Let me see here. 116. 116. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. I saw the word bothers. What bothers me is she and Jem will have to absorb some ugly things pretty soon. It's that conversation with Uncle Jack. This is chapter 9. Scout is she cracked her cousin Frances in the teeth for talking trash about her dad. And it looks like, the conversation is with Uncle Jack. Looks like these are some of Atticus's words. He says, Scout's got to learn to keep her head and learn soon with what's in store for her the next few months. The next few months, if it's Christmas, then we're talking about January, February, March, April, maybe. And I think he's probably talking about the upcoming trial. She's coming along though. Jem's getting older and she follows his example a good bit now. And all she needs is assistance sometimes. And Jack's like, Atticus, you never laid a hand on her. And Atticus is like, yeah, I know. I never laid a hand on her. So far, I've been able to get away with threats. Jack, she minds me as well as she can. Doesn't come up to scratch half the time, but she tries. Uncle Jack says, that's not the answer. And Atticus says, no. The answer is she knows, I know she tries. That's what makes the difference. And then the quote, what bothers me that she and Jem are going to have to absorb some pretty ugly things soon. So you can see that's an example of like reading around so that you can offer a summary of what's been happening in your own words for the lead in. These are Atticus's words. So we're in pretty good shape as far as the attributive tag goes. You can hear me right now. I'm just digging back through my notebook because I'm looking for that page of transitions. It's not too far away, I don't think. Let me see if I can find it. Transitions, a few pages away. Here it is. There's a whole list here. Like you can use it really any of these transitions. So alternatively, in contrast, lastly, finally, in other words, for starters. So, any of these are fine. We're just practicing the use of some of these transitions. And it looks like this writer has gone with, to illustrate the point. Notice it comes along with a comma because it's a transition at the beginning of the sentence. Oh, look at, they used that word when. I told you it was a really great lead-in starter word. So when, looks like, here's what we got. To illustrate the point, when Atticus and his brother are talking about how the upcoming trial will affect Jem and Scout, the older sibling says, so, here's a little bit of context for you. When Atticus and his brother are talking about how the upcoming trial will affect Jem and Scout, like it's just a little bit of context. Check out the comma though. Like when this happens, comma, The older sibling says, meaning Atticus says. So it's nearly as simple as that. I'm going to circle this comma real quick too, just so you can see it. Like this is all one sentence. To illustrate the point, when Atticus and his brother are talking about how the upcoming trial will affect Jem and Scout, the older sibling says, and then the piece of text evidence followed by the citation. So transition, lead in, attributive tag, text evidence, citation. It came from, a lot of that work came from digging around for it here in the book, reading around it so you knew exactly whose words they were, being able to summarize it in your own words to let readers know what's been going on, who's involved, what the conversation is. So that's how you write a lead in. It's just context, it's background information, so readers fully understand the text evidence, the nature of the text evidence. There are 2 quick lessons down here. I'm not going to include them in this video. You can read them for yourself. They essentially boil down to this, that if you borrow some dialogue out of To Kill a Mockingbird, like up above, like these words are already in quotation marks in the book because these are some of Atticus's out loud words. But if you borrow a quotation, so if you quote a quotation, we end up adding a third quotation mark. And you can see it up above that there are 3 of them. It's a tiny little detail that you need to be able to get if you want to do really, really well in this class. And then the other one is known as the first reference rule, so that if you borrowed something from Harper Lee, in the first reference, you would need her last name and the page number. But if you borrowed something later on from the same book, we wouldn't necessarily need, we don't need her name anymore. It would just be the page number. So that's just the idea behind the first reference rule. I imagine you'd be going on to number 2 right now and trying it for yourself based on this video. Here's a hint. For us, you'll find the text for number 2 on page 101. 101, Lee, 101, period on the outside. That's for number 2. Go get them.